All right, thanks everyone. I hope that my different style of presentation today will keep you engaged before lunch. I have lots of images for you, beginning, of course, with the wonderful Museum of the Future from Dubai, which opened just some months ago, earlier this year. And it's really this project, as I originally conceptualized, it was just going to be about the Museum of the Future and the Emirati visions of the future. But I have been spending much more time in Germany and also was in the Berlin area in the spring and realized the need to connect Germany to the story. So you'll see I have a slightly different title than what you would have seen before. So I will sort of toggle between two different types of future museums and also within the expo space. So this is the Futurium Museum, also in Berlin, which I was able to visit earlier in the spring, and really just in a similar way, kind of stunning architectural configuration, as you can see with the Dubai example here. And this, for anybody who has been to Berlin but hasn't seen it, it's right next to the train station. So in my research in general, I am an ethnographer of various sorts. I do a lot of interviews, I do participant observation, I attend things, I take pictures of myself in strange future museums. So this is sort of my journey through that, this one from Berlin. And also there's a lot of things that you can't necessarily convey in a talk or in words. And other embodied experiences of attending these types of spaces, and part of that also bring with me from the Dubai Future Museum, where when you enter the museum, you're given this, and it's sort of tracking your movement. And this is a way that your movement is being monitored as you go through the space. So I'm transporting a little bit of that Dubai experience here. And I will come back to this point about having your movements tracked a little bit later. So I'll just start, I think, with some of the themes and the images that you see in this sort of creation or narration of these techno futures in the Futurium in the Berlin Museum. And I had a question for Andy in the last presentation, but I didn't ask it, which was essentially, how is this idea of techno-led abundance, how is it actually different from capitalism? And this is actually really the heart of my presentation and my interest in a lot of these Gulf initiatives, which is to look at how these ideas of abundance and transcending the sort of natural limitations are sort of integrated in these visions of climate collapse, environmental collapse, which incidentally are not new stories. You certainly saw this with the idea of in the book Future Shock, or in any of the sort of eco-catastrophism narratives from the 60s and 70s. So here we sort of see this overarching theme in the Futurium in Berlin, with a focus on the natural resource limitations of our planet, and a really strong sort of design around questions. You'll see that through all of the different displays that I'll show here. But overall, trying to get people to reflect on these bigger questions of resource and resource limitations. So in this here, we should be rethinking nature. We should be thinking about a number of different trajectories. So I think this font from the slide here is way too small to read, but in the sort of description under rethinking nature, we see that they start talking about how everything is green, natural, and healthy. This is the environment that many people want. And then they sort of go to talk about these human interventions in the environment, and then they write, one thing is certain, humans will continue to intervene in the environment to sustain their lives. So how do we manage to meet our needs in the future without destroying nature even more? And this is sort of going back to Andy's point about the sustainability discourse, and this is just that very common narrative of we need to sustain life for future generations, but we're still going to provide, and we will find a way to transcend those natural limitations. Which I don't know, sometimes I see something in my fieldwork, or I read some kind of quote, like I mentioned Susan Buck-Morris's quote about colonizing the future. This one little small display in the Futurium Museum really stuck with me, this idea of infinite provision. I really had to stop there and think about that. This is that dream. This is that dream of the techno-led abundance, infinite provision. And there's all sorts of ways. I mean, this display is actually talking about shopping and consumerism, which is wonderful and fitting. But I think this is the overarching narrative that you see in a lot of this sort of environmentalist discourse of rethinking nature, rethinking it in a way that can give us that infinite provision, infinite abundance. One way you can see this at the Futurium is also if you go to the top, to the roof, and you can look at these lovely, beautiful, fancy solar panels, which, I mean, I'm sure they're producing something, right? But the narrative, they're more icons, they're more symbols than they are about actual production of energy. In my other research in the Arabian Peninsula, where I look at the sort of spectacle of solar power, you see this extensively, where this is also part of that infinite provision narrative, that we will find a way to continue to produce and we will just transcend those natural limitations. In other spaces in the Futurium Museum, you can sort of see this story being mapped onto cities and how and trying to encourage people to think about and conceptualize green cities. Sometimes you get displays that will talk about the justice narratives that we need to be designing these green cities for all, and in the German materials that I've looked at, and also with the expo display I'll talk about in a minute, you have a much stronger focus on that idea of justice, and this is about creating possibilities for everyone. But you also still have this hyper, I don't know, sci-fi type image interwoven with these stories of justice and green cities, that you have, I mean, it looks to me like a UFO or a spaceship landing there in the city, that this is going to be this high-tech future. And to Kezia's question before, who built those buildings? Right? Who's doing this labor? Who's imagining this city for all? Those are questions that kind of get masked by the aesthetics and that sort of visual reproduction of this fantasy, that we see that those workers and those bodies are sort of erased in a number of ways. But overall, you could see throughout the museum and the space that you're being encouraged to imagine other possibilities for what that green future city might look like. And I think this one I wanted to just, so they sort of ask you at the very end of this display, in what ways would you change the city? And always encouraging the visitors to reflect and think about how they would do it differently. It's sort of positioned as this broader open-ended question. Sometimes you're encouraged to interact with the displays. Kids are sort of encouraged to draw parts of the Berlin city map and their imagination for what this would look like, and the sort of put up on the sideboard. And other places you can see where the visitors are being encouraged to think about, I think on this display they're asked, what could you do without? what could you cut out from your life? So in this way, just trying to make it more interactive and to encourage people to think of those alternative futures. In the basement, then you have this sort of future, the Futurium lab, and it's this kind of maker space. It's this very, I would say, sort of contemporary type of approach to encouraging creativity and creative creative work and art to imagine these possible futures. And in this space, again, I can't really reproduce this in this particular context, but this is a much more embodied sort of interaction, and it has a different sort of experience for those who are actively going there and building things and engaging in discussions in this particular space. But overall, I think that the general message that you really get from this particular space is this idea that this should be a space for asking questions, for interrogation, for creativity, for imagination. To the point also about who built those buildings, who gets to do that? Who gets to participate in that act of creativity? That is a question that's just sort of, I mean, we're just visitors. We are living in bodies, obviously, as we move through this space, but we're sort of that sort of embodied experience of who even enters such a beautiful, iconic structure is left unanswered or unaddressed. This was also something that you saw extremely dominant thread in Germany's Expo pavilion at Expo 2020, which was in Dubai. It was postponed a year, so it ran from October 21 until March of this year. So I visited many times and designed a student class around this, and was also able to visit on my own. So in the Campus Germany pavilion, the theme of environmentalism was, I want to say it was over the top, but that was all it was, essentially. It was thinking about sort of Germany's vision for what a green future might look like. And so you enter this space and you have 100,000 ideas for a sustainable future, and you're encouraged to go sort of, well, not jump into the ball pit, but you can go play around in the ball pit and imagine all these possibilities for what sustainability looks like. When you enter the pavilion as well, you have to take a name badge, and it's a sort of device that you have to wear around your body the entire time, and in it you enter your name and personal information. So you have this badge that is tracking your movement also through the particular space. And in this space, you're also being asked to vote. For every time you want to move to a different part of the pavilion, you have to vote yes or no. Do you want to design our cities to be more sustainable? Vote yes or no. There's a number of other ones about renewable energy. There's just every single room that you want to enter into, you have to vote. So this is, again, just let me reiterate, this is in Dubai. This is a message in my interpretation of it. I haven't talked with the designers of it, but this is very clear part of the broader conversation about what voting and democracy looks like and how that should factor into these conversations about sustainable futures. So this was an extremely dominant part of that particular story, and I couldn't figure out how to integrate the video here, but at the end of the pavilion experience, when you go to Campus Germany, you enter this one room, and it's called the graduation ceremony. So you all must enter the room. You sit on a chair that's hanging from the ceiling. Everybody's on these chairs that are hanging from the ceiling. And your name starts popping up on the walls and sharing that we all voted together for a green future. And it has this very sort of strange video display that's really wonderful. I'm happy to share it with anybody who wants to see it. But it starts to identify us and where we are coming from on the screens, on the projector, based on the badge that we are wearing. But in the end, we're all there to celebrate, and our swings start swinging, and we're moving in unison in this particular new vision of a green planet. So, some interesting contradictions in this particular experience, but not entirely unusual for Expo. So Expo also, there were lots of different pavilions. Many of them had similar environmental themes attached to them, and this was in fact how I designed my excursion with my students around this idea of sustainability. There was a sustainability pavilion at Expo as well. And I think what was so fascinating about the sustainability pavilion is that you enter, and it's this sort of space in order to move through it, you go through all of these displays about environmental collapse. We are facing apocalypse, guys. Like, this is the story, and it's all this really, really scary experiences. You descend into the bottom to the laboratory of future values. And this is then this sort of space of, okay, you just saw the end of the world, and now we need to be excited about these new shiny techno futures. And they really are techno futures. I didn't have any great displays on here, but you've got, there's all sorts of symbols of Emirati nationalism interwoven with this as well. But you have a farmer who's controlling his crops with, and the watering system with his cell phone, and all sorts of other ideas about these sort of techno-optimistic visions for how we can rethink nature, to quote the Futurium display. So this was a dominant theme in the sustainability pavilion, predictably. The Emirati pavilion, this is the UAE's pavilion, they also sort of had some of the themes of environmentalism as well. But there you have a slightly different sort of narrative. I don't know how visible this is, but these are sand dunes that are inside, and they're actually sand. And of course, I don't have any good pictures of this. Who's doing the work? There's workers who are sweeping the sand because people would mess it up all the time, and they're just workers that are constantly recreating the sand dunes. But here we have projected onto the sand dunes these different sort of ideas, and this idea that we are coming together to realize this common dream. This is an extremely common thread or dominant trope in the UAE, that we are this plural country. We have hundreds of different nationalities. Only 10% of the population or less is Emirati. Everybody else is a foreigner. So in this particular narrative of Emirati nationalism, it's to say, we are different, but we are coming together for a singular purpose. We're not necessarily voting here. We are coming together for a common vision, and that vision can take lots of different forms. So I could talk for hours about that and won't. So I'll just sort of focus on the Museum of the Future, because the Emirati pavilion here, this is an Abu Dhabi-led enterprise, I should say. So just quick primer for those who don't know that much about the UAE. UAE is 7 different emirates. Each has a different ruling family that presides over it. The 2 dominant emirates, the ones with the most power, money, influence, would be Abu Dhabi, which is where the capital is, and Dubai, which is where, well, Dubai is. You all probably know about Dubai. So it's a relatively wealthy place in comparison to the other emirates. But there's a difference in terms of how the ruling families think about and project certain images of the future. And there is one vision for Abu Dhabi, which I will leave out of this presentation, but I'm happy to talk with people if they are interested. Because I want to talk a bit more about the Dubai vision for the future, and how this is being projected in the space of the Museum of the Future, and also through the Dubai Future Foundation. So just to sort of give you a quick intro to the Dubai Future Foundation, which, yeah, I can't say that much about it, but their vision, so that you understand this, is to make Dubai a leading city of the future. And their mission is to collectively imagine, inspire, and design Dubai's future. And this is a quote from Sheikh Mohammed, who I've seen a lot of different places. So Sheikh Mohammed is the sort of the top person, the ruler of Dubai, his image and his likeness are portrayed everywhere around Dubai and other parts of the UAE. So this quote you see in a lot of different places, whether it's in education facilities, or I was at the big solar park in Dubai recently, and they also have this quote up there. But this is this idea that you have to be creative and you have to act on the future, and to do that as a decisive, sort of bold movement. And this is then sort of associated with his own visionary identity, and something that the story of the future is very much a story that he wants people to understand. He's sort of the leader of this. So he also then presided over the inauguration of the Museum of the Future in February. So you can sort of see how this was broadcast. The event was quite a spectacle. And yeah, so I was not able to attend the inauguration, but I was able to go to the visit on a second trip back to the UAE this spring in March, and so I was able to get my little badge and be identified as I moved through the museum. It's aesthetically, I mean, I think that there's lots of curious architecture in Dubai. It's not one of the stranger things. I think one of the stranger things I did go to earlier this year was the world's largest picture frame. Literally, it's a gold picture frame, but I don't even know how many stories high. It's absolutely enormous. You can go to the very top. Strange, but in any case, there is some sort of aesthetic appeal I can see to the Museum of the Future. But the first thing you do actually should sort of explain this space. So you enter, this is the foyer, and you enter the queue. I have a pointer. This is the queue, and then you go into this place where you then are sort of shuffled onto an elevator. And this is not just any elevator, right? This is, we're going to Mars, guys. We are now, and you're being told in this whole thing that we are now entering this capsule, and we are leaving Earth, and we are skyrocketing into outer space. So this is part of the Emirati vision for colonizing Mars. They started in 2017, they started the Mars 2117 project with the idea that the UAE should, well, Dubai in particular, should be supporting and working toward developing the first inhabitable human colony or settlement in Mars. So this is part of that bigger vision. You enter this space. We are all sort of being told this, and you have this sort of strange videos showing you you're leaving Earth, and you can look down and see this sort of image. And so now, once we reach the top, we are in Mars in 2117. And our project that we are given as a group is that when we get to this top floor, that we need to participate in colonizing Mars. We need to contribute our labor to this project. So you're sort of guided through this. These pictures are kind of difficult to see, but you're sort of guided. You're given a mission by the person who's moving you through this space, and told that you need to start thinking about how you personally are going to involve yourself and your labor and your interests in this colonization project. At the very end, I'll come back to this picture because it's pretty great. So this is the top floor. So you arrive and you sort of move through here. You go through orientation, recruitment, monument to the pioneers, because yeah, outer space, Earth overview, and then here at the very end, these are the application stations. In order to leave, you have to apply to a job in which you are then going to help with the settlement mission. So, of course, I don't know. I ended up with junior bio designer, whatever that particularly means. I don't really know. But in this particular sort of drama, you see how we have this techno future being imagined. But not only that, we as individuals are being enlisted into this project. We are not just asked to imagine, okay, what would it be like to colonize Mars? No, we're being told you have a task, you have to go and like concretely imagine and work toward this. So there's this sort of theater in all of this, but it is also a theater that sort of enlists you as a particular kind of subject, as a working subject. So there's, I won't go into all of the specificities of the other spaces in the museum. I think that the Mars top floor is the one that's most engaging because your movement is controlled in a way that you don't have the freedom to move as you wish at your leisure. The lower floors you have a little bit more choice, and there you also have this idea of, well, one is the HEAL Institute. Here is also environmental collapse is coming. We need to think about how we're going to heal the earth and heal ourselves. There's another one that is this just the, oh no, it does have English. This one is also just a sort of calming space, but overall a sort of contrast to that harsh techno future image that we got with Mars. So there it sort of takes you to a different sort of intervening space. Below that, though, then I think this is where I think you kind of come back to that techno future vision. You have this tomorrow today display, and here you can see they've described it as a sort of ever-changing display of near future technologies. So these are projects that essentially are actually in design or have been developed by different partners, and you can see the strategic partners of the museum who are those particular partners. A lot of them are various Dubai entities, so state-controlled, state-owned, partially state-owned, whatever that might be. And then you have a number of corporate partners: PepsiCo, SAP, Visa, Emirates, the airline, which is also state-owned, and Audi is on there as well. So in this particular space, you also have this sort of hypermodern image that I've been talking about as well. To kind of come back to some of the German connections here, because there are many, and I don't have the time or space, or I think some of the insights to fully understand all of the German connections here. But you have a company like Volkswagen, which has this autonomous car that is being displayed here, and then next to that there's, I'm afraid these are not very legible, but you also then have another Audi car as a fully electric concept car. So to Janus's point before, maybe there is some movement as they try to get enlisted in these projects and take up some of the support from the Dubai Future Foundation. Here you also have this idea of how can we hack our bodies, how can we heal our planet. Here again, you'll start to notice that this is designed around questions. How can we imagine X, Y, or Z? But overall, this idea of how can we heal the planet, how can we think about the planet in the future, it struck me that there was a pretty stark difference between colonizing Mars and preserving some remnants of life. So this space, it's really hard to capture this on a photograph, but this space was really quite remarkable. It was a dark room, and you just had these sort of like this big little glass vials through the entire room, and the idea of this particular space was to say that this is sort of like this bank for preserving all these sort of animals, DNA, and keeping some kind of record of that in this particular space. So a lot of this is then just about let's conserve the things that we can, but not necessarily a whole Earth. Let's solve or imagine a future. Let's at least just use our technology to capture the remnants of what we've destroyed. But this sort of comes back to then this bigger idea that I saw in Futurium of infinite provision, right? So this is just sort of a mock window that you can look out and see the future city equipped with the drones, as in the future provision or infinite provision story in the Futurium Museum, where here you again are being told that the Earth is collapsing, and so we just need to imagine this other space where we can still have infinite abundance if we just engineer our way out of it. And we also, just to a little bit about the actors and the people who are going to engineer us out of this. Much of this discussion about the future in the UAE, and again, I've talked about this in other places but don't really have the time to today, is targeted toward children. And it feels almost childish when you're moving through this space. Although you could see from the elevator picture that there weren't any children that were attending with me, but they had this special space in kind of in the basement, or actually I don't think it was the basement. I think it was like second floor, where you could have future heroes. And the future heroes, like in the Futurium basement, the children who are there being encouraged to go play and construct different imaginations, or play with their imagination into what the future might look like. That this is about promoting this creative thinking for the younger generations. Doing that around these bigger sort of existential questions. How do we heal our planet? How do we hack our bodies? How do we rethink nature? But in none of this are we really thinking about this question of whose futures are we talking about? Are we just imagining that those children, those little Emirati children waving the Emirati flags, are going to, are those the future heroes? What kinds of circumstances are they living, and whose future is this? Is it Sheikh Mohammed? Are those children who are sort of brought into this system also already being enlisted in this project? As I was being enlisted as a worker in colonizing Mars, it feels to me very much that these children are also being enlisted into this particular project of a future. And I would say that this is not entirely different from what we see in other places where these future imaginaries are happening. And this is what I said before, I'm a scholar of authoritarianism. I don't see authoritarianism as state-based. I think that you have authoritarian spaces and authoritarian practices in lots of different places. And a big part of that, to my question for Andy before, is that this sort of idea of techno-led abundance and this infinite provision, it's also a sort of capitalist dream. And it's a capitalist dream that is authoritarian in its effort to reproduce itself, to foreclose those imaginations of the future. And we're foreclosing that not because we're not asking questions. Should we green our cities, or should we, I don't know, be working toward saving or healing the planet? Those are really simplistic questions, I'm sorry to say. I mean, I feel myself to be very much an environmentalist. Of course we should, but how, what is democracy if we're just being asked to vote on that? There are other questions that are being defined also by companies like Siemens, which is very active in the UAE, and a number of other corporate actors here working together with various state institutions. And these sorts of relationships also have their own authoritarianisms, and they constrain that open future that Simone de Beauvoir was talking about. So, thank you, sorry.